Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Kelsey Kloboski with Accessible Web. I'm a digital accessibility specialist. And so a big part of my day-to-day role is evaluating digital content and web content against the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So today we're going to be talking about an intro to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So first, what are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? Or you may also hear it referred to as WCAG or WCAG or WCAG. These are a set of guidelines and recommendations on how to build accessible digital content. You probably hear WCAG discussed most often with websites, but it applies to all types of digital content, including mobile apps and digital documents like PDFs. The guidelines are developed and maintained by an international standards organization called the W3C, or the World Wide Web Consortium, that manages various centralized technical specifications related to the web. WCAG is not legally binding on its own. But we'll talk about that a bit more later in the talk. The guidelines are also designed to prioritize equitable experience with a strong emphasis on user flexibility and choice. What does WCAG require? Essentially, there are two main goals. The same information is available to all users and the same functionalities available to all users. WCAG evaluates this using the POUR principles, that's P-O-U-R, which stands for perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. Perceivable means that information and content is available to different senses, typically sight, hearing, and touch. So for example, images must have text alternatives. When implemented correctly, those text alternatives can be read aloud by a screen reader or converted to touch using a refreshable braille display. Operable means that functionality can be performed in multiple ways. So for example, interactive components must be usable with a keyboard, not just a mouse. Understandable means that information and functions must be comprehensible to users. So another example of this one is a form field must have a label that describes what information the user is being asked to enter. Robust means that digital content must be built in ways that supports compatibility between technologies like browsers, operating systems, and assistive technology. Each of these principles breaks down into a set of guidelines, and each guideline contains a set of specific requirements, also called success criteria. In the interest of time, we won't dig too far into individual requirements in this presentation. WCAG is structured around 3 versions, and within each version, there are 3 conformance levels. So let's talk about what that means. So first, versions. WCAG currently has 3 versions, 2.0, 2.1, and 2.2. Each new version includes and builds on the previous versions. 2.0 was published in 2008 and introduced the current WCAG structure and approach with 61 success criteria. Now, the iPhone was released in 2007, so this 2008 version of the guidelines did not take into account touchscreens, tiny viewports, and other technology that's commonplace today, because at the time when it was being developed, those technologies were not really being widely used. Version 2.1 was published in 2018. This version added 17 success criteria, primarily related to mobile devices, low vision, and cognitive disabilities. Version 2.2 is the most recent version and was published in 2023. It added 9 success criteria related to gaps in the prior versions, such as dragging movements, added more requirements related to cognitive disabilities, and for the first time made a success criteria obsolete, the parsing criteria. Within each version, there are 3 levels of conformance: single A, double A, and triple A. Single A can be thought of as minimum accessibility. AA has improved accessibility and is the most common accessibility target for most organizations. AAA is advanced accessibility. It's uncommon for organizations to strive for full AAA conformance, and W3C even doesn't recommend this level of conformance for all organizations. However, there are several AAA criteria that are great best practices to follow, even if you're not aiming for full AAA conformance. Putting all this together, when we talk about a WCAG conformance goal, we are talking about both version number and conformance level. We generally recommend a goal of WCAG 2.2 AA conformance, which, as of this presentation, uses the most recent version of WCAG and includes a robust set of accessibility requirements. So a really common question that we get is, do I have to follow WCAG? So as you'll hear me say many times in response to accessibility questions, it depends. Depending on your location or the nature of your organization, WCAG may be required by law. For example, in the United States, ADA Title II now requires a certain level of WCAG conformance for government entities. We have an upcoming webinar on this topic if you want to learn more. Depending on your customer base, WCAG may be required by contract. So for example, if you have clients that are institutes of higher education or they're located in countries or states with robust accessibility laws, your clients may want to include a specific conformance level in their contractual agreements with you. Even if you are not required to follow WCAG specifically, your digital content is likely required to be accessible. Accessibility laws are becoming more common and specific globally. WCAG is a technical resource for making digital content more accessible. Does WCAG conformance mean fully accessible? WCAG is an incredibly valuable foundation and also provides a shared understanding of accessibility. However, it does not guarantee full accessibility for all users. There are a few reasons for this. One reason is that WCAG is designed around binary pass-fail statements. Known gaps include support for cognitive disabilities and highly contextual accessibility issues. You may have noticed that I've mentioned requirement gaps related to cognitive disabilities several times. This is one of the largest and most varied categories of disabilities, and it's difficult for a single set of standards to account for every possible user need. Secondly, WCAG focuses on baseline accessibility, not usability. But one thing to really keep in mind with this is that an issue that is a, quote, usability concern for one person may be an accessibility barrier to another. Another reason why WCAG may not mean fully accessible is because the guidelines change slowly. The requirements are not always clearly applicable to the newest digital trends and technologies, and WCAG takes time to catch up. So what about WCAG 3.0? I know this is a topic that some folks have started to hear a little bit more about. WCAG 3.0 will be a major change to how accessibility is evaluated. The current goals are to develop a system that is both more accurate and more nuanced in how it evaluates and communicates about the accessibility of digital content. As of this presentation, we expect the final publication of WCAG 3.0 to still be several years away. W3C takes a highly collaborative and transparent approach to changes to WCAG. This approach has many benefits, but also means that updates to WCAG are a slow-moving process. WCAG 3.0 has opportunities to read drafts, provide public comment, or join working groups. So if it's something you want to learn more about or you want to keep track of, I definitely encourage you to participate in some of those opportunities. While we should be aware of WCAG 3.0 as the future of web accessibility, for the time being and for the near future, the 2.x system is still the industry standard. So we've kind of gone over an overview of WCAG, so I wanted to go over a few takeaways that I hope you keep in mind going forward from this presentation. WCAG is useful for creating a shared understanding and foundation for digital accessibility. WCAG conformance is a valuable milestone, but does not guarantee full accessibility. Because of that, WCAG conformance should not be your end goal. So where can you go from there? We recommend 3 steps to go beyond WCAG. One is to include users with disabilities in your user testing. This is the best way to identify gaps that technical WCAG conformance has not addressed. This will also improve your overall usability. You should also maintain clear communication channels for your users to report accessibility issues and then address those issues. The best strategy is to plan your process ahead of time for when, not if, an accessibility issue is identified. And finally, stay up to date on changing tools and technologies and how they may affect your organization's digital accessibility. And how can Accessible Web help? So we do offer several services with usually a heavy focus around the WCAG requirements and how they can support accessible digital content. We have web accessibility software, which is our RAMP platform, which has tools to automate and facilitate continuous compliance with updated accessibility standards. And a lot of our tools are based specifically around the WCAG criteria. We also offer consulting and training if you want expert guidance and training sessions on understanding the criteria better or understanding other nuanced topics around web accessibility. We have accessibility audits where we do a thorough evaluation comparing digital content to the web content accessibility guidelines and comparing them to a specific conformance level. And we also prepare voluntary product accessibility templates, which are essentially a report that provides information on the accessibility product by framing it around what aspects of the web content accessibility guidelines it meets or doesn't meet. All right, so that is the end of my prepared remarks, and now we are ready for discussion and questions. And thanks again so much for joining today.